Hi everyone, and welcome to my third video from the Big Girls on the Move campaign. You can see in my little home studio today we've got some new technical additions. I have a little screen here that I'll be showing you some photos. Over here I have another screen with my Facebook page up there, so please do join in the conversations or if you have any questions. And thank you to everybody who's contributed to the Big Girls on the Move campaign. The link is in the description here, and the campaign, for those who are joining me for the first time, is to place 20 boxes of the Big Girls little colouring book, which is a relaxation coaching colouring book for women, to place 20 boxes of those into 20 domestic violence services for women here in South Australia. And hopefully over time we'll be able to expand that to other states and maybe even internationally. That'd be fabulous. So today's topic is about colouring and conversation circles, pardon me, and how they play a role inside of, behind the walls of domestic violence services and also in women's groups across the community. I know that some of you who are watching will have been a member of my Women's Colouring and Conversation Circle, so welcome to you. And for those who are not familiar with the term or may even be wondering why on earth did colouring books start to appear everywhere, colouring books for adults, when in the past, really, if you wanted to colour in, you sort of used your children's colouring book. I think there's a very good reason for it, and when the phenomena happened around about 2015, which was actually the year that my colouring book came out, we in the domestic violence, or some of us in the domestic violence sector, felt that it was one of the best kept secrets has finally kind of reached public consciousness. And the reason that such a simple activity has become so popular is that it actually takes us back to a place where we were as children, colouring and just having a relaxing time. This sampler here on the screen is from the Big Girls colouring book, and it's a meditation on relaxation and thinking. So the colouring book phenomena really said people are looking, and it's not just women, but I think it's the majority. If you look at the many colouring book groups on Facebook, people are looking for simple responses to some of the complexities of life. And so colouring is a form of, I say, med-artation, so the word art in the centre. My microphone just fell. I'll just place that here. So Carl Jung, who I'm a great fan of, and I learned a lot about the Mandala through his work, he said, sometimes the hands can solve a mystery that the intellect has struggled with in vain. Meaning that we're often trained, particularly after early childhood, to think things through and to work things out and to give thought to something. Whereas the colouring process relieves our mind of that busyness and really slows down our breathing. It's a form of mindfulness in that we're looking at the page in front of us. And it gives us the opportunity to just give the mind a rest. And understandably, inside of domestic violence shelters, where there's a great deal of stress, and you can see on the screen at the moment the Breathe Deeply meditation, a colouring page, that sometimes having something to just distract the mind for a little while, give the hands a creative activity, and then actually, in doing so, it returns us back to what we used to do as children. Pablo Picasso said, every child is born an artist. The problem is how to remain one. And really, in a world that values the sciences probably academically over the arts, that sees sort of arts as a bit of an indulgence, probably underestimates the power of the creative processes. So, in domestic violence services and the places where I work, I host a program called The Art of Change. It's very informal. So we just sit at the table and People don't have to speak. Often when women are at that really early stages of crisis, sometimes even talking is difficult. And then there's the opposite. Sometimes you might really need to talk. So it's a very organic and flexible circle. And we do sit mostly in the circle rather than lined up in chairs with our backs to one another with a screen at the front. And in that space, in that creative space, some of that natural inner wisdom, that intuition that we haven't always been able to connect with. And again, I'll just show you the pollinator image. The words that go with that from the Big Girls Colouring book are, "My thoughts pollinate the ether." It was inspired by a bee that I saw when I was in the garden land on a flower, pick up the pollen and take it away. And it occurred to me that thinking is a bit like that. We know intuitively sometimes we can meet a person and we just get this instant connection, or something that goes, oh, that person doesn't feel right for me. Or we can step into someone's home and feel the atmosphere. Equally, we can maybe even just pass a stranger in the street and just feel a sense of wariness, or a sense of like, oh, that's somebody I could probably connect with. So we are actually operating on the sixth sense intuitive level a lot of the time, but it's often not recognised in the Western culture, because we know many First Nations cultures recognise the intuitive and the I guess the unseen equally as much as what can be seen and felt and heard. There's another page from the colouring book which is changing your thinking can stop you from sinking. And that's really a meditation on how sometimes just reframing a story that we're telling ourselves, there can be power in the reframing of it so that we can actually feel better. So for example, if a story that she has been telling herself consistently is, I'm stupid, I should have known better, it was my fault, which unfortunately is very common for women who are recovering from domestic violence. If she changes that story to, I'm going to learn some things from this experience that I'll take forward with me for the rest of my life, or I didn't know something at the time but I do now, and because of that I'll make a difference, I won't go down that path again. So she's taking the same story, doing a reframe on it, she's changing her thinking, and so that can actually help to keep her buoyant and feel a sense of optimism in what has possibly been a very difficult situation. On a personal level, I lost my friend Janet. She died in domestic violence in the year 2001. Her partner then killed himself. She was my lifelong friend, and I was already working in domestic violence shelters at the time when this happened. And I can say from a personal experience that nothing ever prepares you for such a terrible and shocking event. So one could say, well, where is the positive in that? And there is really no positive in a woman losing her life and leaving a family of children behind her. But the positive I chose to find in that was to create a mandala from the period of her death to I was delivering her eulogy at the funeral. The positive experience was that I could give my mind somewhere to focus on that mandala, which cleared a space for me to be able to do the eulogy in a way that honoured her life. And from that I have a poster-sized mandala that I share with other women in domestic violence shelters about the strength and the courage that she had along her journey of life. And she was more than just the story of her murder. So I think all situations have the opportunity for us to find something. And in that finding something, we are able to reclaim some of that story, because part of domestic violence is that we are feeling very powerless, and power has been taken away. Pardon me again. I just have a little sip of my herb tea. Thank you to my friend Joy. Thank you to my friend Joy for my birthday cup. That was a little gift she gave me the other day. So I just want to close this conversation, move towards just talking a little bit more about the campaign, by adding that creativity in domestic violence shelters is also a place where we can embrace cultural diversity. And what I mean by that is if we have women from migrant and refugee backgrounds in our circle and English isn't their first language, and maybe Arabic, Hazaragi, it may not be the first language of the facilitator, then when we are creating and colouring together, we're in a unified space. So there are some unifying aspects to sitting and colouring together. And in that rhythmic calmness of colouring, sometimes a woman is able to relax for the first time in a very long time. So for those who maybe are not aware of the magic of the colouring process, who may just think, oh, it's just colouring in, I invite you to just try it for yourself. If you haven't connected with the colouring book phenomena, just return to that space that you probably were involved with when you were a child, and I'm pretty sure you'll find that it's very relaxing. I work particularly in the Mandala form, and you can see this is actually the mandala for the patterns conversation in our book. I release the patterns that no longer serve me, and I create positive new patterns. So that began with a blank black and white template, and actually my mum, beautiful mother Maureen, coloured that one. And you can see that it's a personal expression of creativity. If I place that mandala on the table with 15 women, there'll be 15 versions of it. So although it's a template for creativity, it's actually a way that I think of it a little bit like walking the labyrinth. That is that beautiful rhythmic pattern that's created where people do a meditation walk by walking into the centre of the labyrinth. So colouring a mandala is a little bit like that. You're walking an existing template, but you're filling that template with your own thoughts and your own reflections and your own creativity. So I hope that that has explained a little bit about why the colouring phenomena has become so popular. And I watched a program on ABC last night about 3 women who were exiting prison, and one of the women was sitting colouring in part of the conversation. So it's used far and wide in different settings, different institutions, in healing processes. So when the Big Girls Colouring Book was created, it actually had a long history of individual pages that mandala colouring pages that I'd created in shelters for women. So it's really a culmination of some of those life coaching processes. And it has text, so it is also a very simple entry-level life coaching reflection book. So I'm just going to check now to see if I have had any comments or hellos to respond to. No, that's not coming up on my page. So just in summary, meditation is art and meditation. It's an open-eyed meditation. Many women who come to domestic violence shelters are not ready to close their eyes to meditate yet, because when you've had trauma and maybe a long-term experience of being under attack or feeling an attack is imminent, then closing your eyes and relaxing is probably not for some women, is not your preferred way of being. That to be aware of your environment, to have your eyes on alert is really important. And so the open-eyed meditation, the focus on that page in front, is really relaxing and restorative. The Big Girls on the Move crowdfunding campaign has been generously supported by a number of people over the last 2 years. We had a bit of a break in the campaign. We're halfway through funding the Catherine House box of colouring books, and after that the books will go to Ninko and Nungamimina, who are Aboriginal Women's Homeless Domestic Violence Services, Zara Foundation, which is economic empowerment after domestic violence, and Northern Domestic Violence Service. There's a few spots there for people who, particularly in South Australia, if you'd like to send me an inbox and go on the list, you're most welcome. So I think that's pretty well all for today. hopefully this has given you a little bit more insight to the role of colouring and creativity in domestic violence shelters. And I should probably just add also that the books have been going to women who are in emergency motels. The shelter may be full, or it may be late at night too late for an intake into a residential shelter, so she may be accommodated in a emergency shelter, and the books are made available for women then too. So please know that if you contribute to the campaign, the books will be going to places where they are really valued and needed. So thanks very much, and I'll see you hopefully for the next live conversation, which will be this coming Saturday, with a little shorter one on Thursday because that's my birthday, and I'm going to speak a little bit about the birthday magic and the campaign. So thanks very much, and I'll see you later.